Everything was fine. Until I saw a photo of my daughter in someone else's family photo shoot, with a caption that said she was their child. My name is Kaylee, I'm 35 years old, and for the past 9 years, I've been raising my daughter Lily entirely on my own. Her biological father left the moment I told him I was pregnant. No hesitation, no discussion, just a cold exit that left me standing in a small apartment with a cheap test clutched in one hand and a future I hadn't yet imagined staring back at me. He never came to the hospital, never signed a birth certificate, never once reached out. So from the very beginning, it was just me and Lily, navigating every scraped knee, every midnight fever, every moment of growth and change as a two-person team. There were nights in those early months when I sat on the kitchen floor with her pressed to my chest, exhausted beyond words, counting coins to see if I could afford both formula and the bus fare to work the next morning. But we made it through. I worked double shifts, leaned on no one, and built a life that revolved around the tiny human who looked up at me with wide eyes and complete trust. I've never once regretted staying. I've never once wished I had walked away like he did. Because even when everything else felt uncertain, I knew she was mine, and that meant something. Meant everything. Once upon a time, Jake came into my life quietly, almost like the kind of calm you don't notice until it settles in and makes everything feel safer. We started as friends, both of us cautious in our own ways, him never asking too much too fast, me always measuring how much of my world I was ready to share. When Lily turned 1, something shifted between us. It wasn't sudden or dramatic, it was gentle and natural, like we had just taken a step forward without needing to speak about it. We began dating, and for the next 3 years, Jake became a steady presence in both of our lives, filling in spaces I hadn't realized had gone quiet. He was never trying to replace anyone, never acting like she owed him anything. But from the way he tied her shoes without being asked, to how he sat through bedtime stories with the same voice he used when he read her books at the library, it was clear that he loved her not out of obligation or performance, but out of something real and rooted. He showed up to preschool art shows and flu season meltdowns, held her hand when she was scared at the dentist, and by the time she could talk in full sentences, she had already started calling him Jakey, with that kind of affection that children don't fake. He wasn't her father by blood, but by heart, he had become something even more honest. The man who chose her. The man who chose us. After the breakup, which was as quiet and respectful as the relationship had been, we chose not to cut each other out of our lives completely. There was no dramatic fallout, no shouting matches or bitterness, just a mutual understanding that we had grown in different directions, and that letting go romantically didn't have to mean letting go of everything. Jake and I remained friends not out of habit or guilt, but because there was still something genuine and kind between us, something worth preserving. Most importantly, he still saw Lily. They spent time together like uncle and niece, the bond they had built over those years of bedtime stories and playground afternoons holding strong despite the change in titles. He'd take her out for ice cream on weekends or show up to her school events with a grin and a bouquet of stickers instead of flowers, and she'd run to him with the same excitement she always had. I was grateful, truly deeply grateful, that she didn't have to lose him too. Everything was based on mutual consent and respect. He wanted to be part of her life, and I trusted that as long as Lily was happy, that door would stay open. It wasn't conventional, but it worked, and that was all that mattered. A few months after Jake and I parted ways, he began dating someone new, a woman named Tracy. I recognized the name immediately, not because we were friends, but because she had hovered quietly on the edge of our social circle during the time Jake and I were together. She had always struck me as reserved, polite in that distant sort of way, never rude but never especially warm either. When I heard they were seeing each other, I didn't feel jealousy or resentment, just a flicker of curiosity and maybe a slight unease I couldn't quite name. It wasn't that Tracy had done anything wrong. On the surface, she seemed perfectly average, neither hostile nor overly friendly, and when Jake casually mentioned her in conversation, I listened without bitterness. I didn't expect her to love Lily the way Jake did, but I assumed, or rather hoped, that she would respect the bond they had, the family we had once been, and the strange but beautiful shape it had taken since the breakup. In my mind, there was enough room for new relationships and old loyalties to coexist. I had no reason to think otherwise. Not yet. One sunny afternoon during a casual meeting in the park, something happened that shifted the air between us in a way that was hard to ignore. Lily had run ahead to the swings, her hair flying behind her in messy braids, laughing in that carefree way only children can. Jake and I were chatting on the bench, a familiar rhythm we had fallen into easily, and Tracy sat beside him, quiet but present. It was all perfectly ordinary until Lily came back toward us, breathless and grinning, cheeks flushed from the sun. Tracy looked at her and said with a soft, almost whimsical tone, "You look like your daddy," and the world seemed to tilt just slightly. There was a pause, tight, immediate. Jake and I exchanged a glance, both instinctively reacting. I gently but clearly said that Jake wasn't Lily's father, and he followed with a small nod, reinforcing that while they were close, he wasn't her dad. But Tracy didn't look embarrassed or apologetic. Instead, she smiled, slow and unreadable, and said, "I meant the connection." It hung there, vague enough to retreat from, but deliberate enough to sting. Lily didn't say anything, but I saw the confusion flicker across her face. I had always been careful to be honest with her about who Jake was. Someone who loved her, someone who had helped raise her for a time, but not her father. It wasn't shameful, it wasn't hidden, and it wasn't up for gentle rewriting. In that moment, Tracy's words felt less like a compliment and more like a quiet, calculated claim, one that left me with a chill I hadn't expected on such a warm day. Then it started to get weirder, in small ways at first, ways that could almost be brushed off if you weren't paying attention, but they began to stack up like unease layered beneath politeness. Tracy would make comments that were just a little too pointed, like when she'd watch Jake tie Lily's shoelaces or help her with a juice box and say with a soft sigh, "He's so good with his girl," letting the words hang like a ribbon in the air. At first, I tried to be understanding. Maybe it was just her way of trying to bond with them both, maybe she didn't fully grasp the weight of what she was implying, or maybe I was overthinking things. But the repetition became hard to ignore. It wasn't just once or twice, she kept doing it, in front of Lily, in front of Jake, in front of me, with that same gentle tone and that same unsettling smile, as though she was rewriting the roles in her head and expecting the rest of us to play along. Jake never corrected her, but I saw the flicker of discomfort in his eyes too, the way he sometimes looked at me afterward as if silently apologizing. Still, I didn't want to blow it out of proportion. The last thing I wanted was to create unnecessary tension or seem possessive about something that wasn't romantic anymore. But then something happened that stripped away all the gray and made it impossible to stay quiet. Something serious. Something that made it clear this wasn't just awkward wording or misplaced affection. This was a boundary being crossed. One afternoon, Jake invited Lily and me to join him for a walk in the park because he was watching his nephew for a few hours, and he thought it would be fun for the kids to play together. It was a sunny day, the kind where everything felt easy and light, and I appreciated that he still included us in parts of his life. We met by the playground, and everything seemed perfectly normal. Lily was excited to see Jake and immediately took off with his nephew toward the swings, while Tracy sat on the bench beside him, sipping an iced coffee like she'd always belonged in that picture. About 20 minutes in, my phone rang. It was a call from my office, an urgent issue with a client that needed immediate attention. I hesitated for a moment, looking toward the kids and then at Jake, who gave me a reassuring nod before I even asked. "Go," he said, "we've got this." I made it clear I'd be gone no more than 30 minutes, maybe less, and that Lily knew to stay close and listen to him. I kissed her on the head, gave her a quick reminder to behave, and left the park, trying to ignore the slight tension in my chest that I couldn't quite explain. It wasn't about Jake. I trusted him and Lily adored him. But something about leaving her alone with Tracy, even for half an hour, didn't sit right. I brushed the feeling aside. It was only 30 minutes. What could really go wrong in 30 minutes? When I returned to the park, everything appeared completely normal on the surface. Lily was still playing near the swings, laughing with Jake's nephew, and Jake was chatting with Tracy, who greeted me with her usual soft smile and a casual wave. She seemed relaxed, maybe even proud, as she stood up and brushed invisible crumbs from her dress before telling me that a photographer friend of hers had happened to be passing through the park and had taken some absolutely beautiful photos of the kids while I was gone. She spoke about it as if it had been a lucky coincidence, a sweet, spontaneous moment captured by someone with a good eye for light and joy. She said it so offhandedly, as if this friend had merely snapped a few casual shots from afar, no big deal, and then added that she would send me the pictures as soon as she got them because, in her words, Lily looked just so perfect with Jake. I smiled politely, trying to match her tone, but something in me flinched at that phrasing. It sounded too deliberate, too staged for someone who just happened to be walking by. I didn't say anything right away. There was no confrontation, no dramatic tension, just a quiet unease crawling its way up my spine as I watched Lily run back toward me, cheeks flushed from the sun, completely unaware that anything was off at all. A few hours later, just as the sun was beginning to set and Lily was tucked into her room reading aloud to her stuffed animals, my phone buzzed with a message from Tracy. True to her word, she had sent over a handful of the photos her photographer friend had taken earlier in the park. At first glance, they were undeniably sweet. Lily sitting cross-legged in the grass with Jake's nephew, her eyes squinting from laughter, and one of her on the swing mid-flight, her hair catching the light just right. There was even a candid shot of Jake kneeling beside her, helping her tie her shoe, the kind of moment that feels warm and timeless. But then, curiosity got the better of me. I clicked on the photographer's name, expecting maybe a portfolio of family portraits or wedding shots, something harmless and polished. Instead, I landed on their social media page, and what I saw made the blood in my body run cold. Scrolling through the feed, I found the same series of photos that had just been sent to me, already posted, already public, with one final image that made me stop breathing. It was a staged portrait, Lily holding Jake's hand, both of them smiling at each other as if posing for a holiday card, and the caption beneath it read, "Beautiful day with Jake and his daughter Lily. The bond between them is unbreakable." My hands trembled. My name was nowhere. My presence, my role, my reality, completely erased. In that moment, I understood that this hadn't been a random, innocent encounter with a camera. This had been planned. Carefully, deliberately. And it wasn't just strange anymore, it was dangerous. There, in full color and perfect composition, was a staged photo that made my entire body go cold. A carefully posed image of Jake, Tracy, Jake's nephew, and my daughter Lily, all sitting together on a picnic blanket like some polished magazine spread. Jake had his arm casually draped around Tracy's shoulders, Tracy was holding a juice box out to the little boy, and Lily was nestled between them, smiling brightly at something off camera, completely unaware of the implications. What made my heart twist wasn't just the photo itself, it was the caption beneath it. "The Johnson Brooks family knows how to have fun," it read, bold and cheerful, tying together Jake's last name and Tracy's as if they were already some official unit. As if my daughter belonged to them. As if I didn't exist. There was no mention that Lily was not their child, no acknowledgement that she had a mother, a life outside this fantasy they were trying to craft. It was a clean, curated lie, one that felt like a threat dressed up as a compliment. I stared at the screen, unable to move, unable to speak, my pulse pounding in my ears. This wasn't just uncomfortable anymore. This was a complete erasure of me, a deliberate rewriting of reality to fit some narrative Tracy was carefully building, and she had used my daughter to do it. I sat down and immediately wrote to the photographer, my fingers trembling with fury as I typed out each word. I told her, firmly and clearly, that she had published a photo of my child without my consent, that I was the legal guardian, and that she had absolutely no right to share my daughter's image online, especially not in the context of a fabricated family portrait. Within the hour she responded, politely, apologetically, but her words made my stomach turn even more. She said she was sorry, that she never meant to cause any distress, and that she had been under the impression everything was cleared in advance. Then she added something that made my jaw tighten. Tracy had told her that Lily was her daughter, and that she, as the child's mother, had given full permission to use the photo publicly. I couldn't breathe for a moment. Tracy hadn't just blurred a boundary, she had stepped over it with both feet, fully confident in her fiction. She had claimed to be Lily's mother, spoken on her behalf, and used that lie to build an image of a family that didn't exist. This wasn't just crossing a line. It was a violation, an impersonation, and a manipulation that I could no longer ignore. I didn't wait a second longer. I immediately wrote to Jake, attaching the screenshot of the post along with a direct, blunt message demanding to know if he had known about this, if he had agreed to have Lily paraded online as part of some fictional family. His response came quickly, and to his credit, he sounded genuinely shocked. He said he hadn't given any kind of permission, that he thought the photos were just for personal memories, and that he had absolutely no idea Tracy planned to post them publicly, let alone with a caption that named Lily as her child. There was real confusion in his words, a kind of stunned disappointment, and I could feel that he was trying to process the same betrayal from his own angle. But as for Tracy, she said nothing. No reply. No explanation. No apology. I had messaged her directly, calmly at first, then more firmly, demanding that she speak to me, that she acknowledge what she had done. But she read the messages and stayed silent, as if hoping that ignoring me would somehow make the storm pass. Her silence spoke louder than any excuse could have. It told me everything I needed to know. Later that week, after days of silence and avoidance, Tracy finally reached out. She asked if we could meet in person to talk, promising that she wanted to clear the air and explain everything. Against my better judgment, I agreed, part of me still holding on to the faint hope that maybe there was some misunderstanding, some fragment of decency that would reveal itself once we sat face to face. But as soon as we sat down, any illusions I had evaporated. She didn't hesitate. She admitted, with a calmness that made my skin crawl, that she had organized everything on purpose. She had arranged it with her photographer friend in advance, knowing exactly when we'd be in the park. She admitted she had waited for the moment I stepped away, knowing I wouldn't be there to stop it, and she told her friend that Lily was Jake's daughter. She smiled when she said it, not with joy but with pride, like she was unveiling the final piece of a plan that had gone exactly as she intended. It was for the illusion of family, she said, as if that made it noble. I just wanted people to see what I saw, a happy future, something whole. I sat there in stunned silence, barely able to process the fact that she had not only erased me from my daughter's identity, but done so consciously, deliberately, for the sake of appearances. She didn't seem to understand, or didn't care, that what she had done wasn't just manipulative. It was cruel, was invasive, and it was unforgivable. Tracy sat across from me with her hands folded tightly in her lap, her voice trembling for the first time as she said it, not as an excuse, but almost like a confession that had been swelling beneath the surface all along. This photo is the only thing that made me feel like a mother, even for a minute. I stared at her, completely stunned, the words sitting heavy in the air between us like thick fog I couldn't clear. I could see the pain in her eyes, the aching emptiness she had tried so hard to fill with someone else's child, with someone else's life, and for a flicker of a moment, I felt something close to pity. But it was only a flicker. Because no matter how much she hurt, it didn't justify what she had done. Lying about my daughter, rewriting her identity, hijacking a sacred bond for a moment of pretend. She could cry about her loss, she could grieve her future, but she had no right to step into mine, to use Lily as a prop in a fantasy she built without permission. I didn't respond right away because honestly, I didn't know what words would even matter in a situation like that. But one thing became crystal clear in the quiet that followed. Tracy would never, under any circumstances, come near my daughter again. Not as a visitor, not as a friend, not as a shadow lingering in our lives. Whatever moment she thought she had captured in that photo, it was the last one she would ever have. I called Jake that evening, after everything had settled into a strange kind of stillness, the kind that only comes after something has cracked and finally broken apart. My voice was calm, but there was a weight in my chest I couldn't shake as I told him we needed to take a step back. I explained that what had happened wasn't just a misunderstanding, it was a boundary that had been trampled, and no matter how much history we had, or how kind he had been to Lily, we couldn't ignore the way this had spiraled into something neither of us had intended. I reminded him, gently but firmly, that Lily doesn't see him as a dad, that she never called him that, never needed him in that role, and that allowing people around her to treat her otherwise only confused and blurred the truth she was growing up with. I told him that I appreciated everything he had done for her, all the moments he had shared, but now we had to protect the reality she knew and trusted. He listened in silence for a while and then he said he understood. He sounded sad but not angry. He said he had no idea how far things had gone with Tracy and that he was sorry for not seeing the warning signs sooner. I could hear it in his voice, he was exhausted too. And with that, it ended. No shouting, no dramatic fallout, just a quiet agreement that this strange, emotionally draining story had run its course. I hung up the phone and sat for a long time in the quiet, watching Lily color at the kitchen table, her little feet swinging off the chair, humming to herself. She was safe, she was whole, and she was mine. That was the only truth I needed.